I think of AO scan in the hub as being a system of which I am a part. So I'm part of the AO hub system, which is kind of weird to think about, but it's true. And there's an interactive quality of that reciprocal dynamic that exists between me and that system, such that the AO and I are interacting with one another to assess where I am in the moment, address where I am in the moment, particularly if I'm not where I want to be or need to be, and then to reassess me to see if I've made the shift. So assess, address, reassess is really how I think of it from a clinical perspective. And I think that works if you're thinking of it systemically as me being part of the system. And see, this is what differentiates it from a treatment intervention in traditional medical or behavioral health terms, because we never treat the person as a part of the system, we treat them as a patient. And so we essentially get rid of patients with this. What we do is we get a colleague. We get a full-blown participant in their own, maintenance and healing and maintenance. I mean, it's not really a popular ideal in Western medicine, but I found that people will think of me as a friend, walking them through their journey, and I know more about their life than most other people in their lives do, because they're able to give voice to things they couldn't give voice to before because of what the AO does. What's our responsibility as people helpers to help people who are struggling? Is that our mission field, so to speak, or is that, we're supposed to be ministers of reconciliation, and sometimes we're reconciling people to themselves or reconciling people to their own bodies or their own minds or their own thoughts. And so when I think about these things that we've been talking about the last couple of days, it's in the context of how do we navigate our daily interactions with the people we come in contact with who may be coming to us for help. How do we do that with compassion? How do we do that and preserve their dignity? How do we do that and make a meaningful change that they can sustain through the rest of their life? It's that give a fish, teach to fish thing. So, and what are the tools we're using to do it? And I just see, the AO hub is a fishing rod and some lures, right? Yeah. And so we're just teaching the brain how to do stuff differently, and that just becomes the tool or the vehicle for doing that, if that makes sense. So we use blue light in audiovisual entrainment for relaxed focus and focused attention. And so again, cyan is better for attention, gaining and maintaining attention, whereas dark blue or deep blue is more associated with sleep. So if you want to do a sleep protocol using audiovisual entrainment, you would use a sliding scale from 7.8 hertz down to 2 hertz, and you would use dark blue light as your wavelength of visual entrainment. And then if you were going to do cranial electric stimulation, you'd want to do like 1, 2, 3, 4 hertz, somewhere in there on the earlobes. So, and again, the idea there is to get the brain to pace down to a lower state of arousal to make it easier to onset sleep. So yeah, so blue light can be used therapeutically, but generally you want to avoid blue light after 9 p.m.
Okay.
Just in general, and particularly in the 45 minutes before going to bed. So there was a book written by Arianna Huffington called, is it The Sleep Revolution? And in it, she talks about the epidemic of sleep problems in the United States. And it is worse here than it is in other countries. I mean, I've traveled all over the world, and even recently. And we definitely do things that other countries don't do to self-sabotage our sleep. Now, the Europeans eat later than we do, but they also go to bed later, get up later, and go to work later than we do. So they offset it. But we tend to eat too close to our bedtimes, which is not good. And we also are engaging in child abuse with the way we treat children in their sleep schedules. I mean, kids need school-age kids, I'm talking about between kindergarten or preschoolers and probably 6th, 7th grade, need 10 hours of sleep, just flat 10 hours. And they need to go to bed, pretty close when the sun goes down. Again, because they're so closely tied to their circadian rhythms. They shouldn't have any smart devices after dinner time. No TVs, no, smart devices at all. And again, because they're more susceptible to blue lights than adults are. And then beginning in about 8th grade, and because of the effects of puberty and hormones and things, kids get a little bit of a circadian sleep disorder, but it's part of growth and development, so we don't call it a circadian sleep disorder. But the kids get shifted about 25% relative to the normal circadian sleep schedule, such that they stay up longer and they get up later. And really, we should modify high school start times for kids' brain's schedule and not to the teachers who teach them. But most high schools start, about 2 hours before kids really are awake. And so, yeah. And we do it because it's more convenient for the teachers, not because it's for the students. So the lymphatic system of the body has lymph nodes, and those nodes, you have draining nodules, and those are part of the body's way of getting rid of waste products, for the lack of a better term. And the glymphatic system is the brain's drainage system for that. The brain doesn't drain while we're upright because the backflow prevention of the blood system prevents the glymph from draining. But once we're horizontal, we're sleeping, that's when the glymph drainage occurs. And so you want to supercharge that glymph system. So the best way to do it is through red light applied to the carotid, internal, external carotids at the neck, and then to the head, and again, intranasally. That's the way to get it in as many places as you can, and then to do that laying down so that you can improve the drainage of the system. There's a chiropractor named Joe DiDuro who wrote a book about his discovery of using red light therapy for draining the glymphatic system. And he came upon his journey of discovery because of a head injury. He had a traumatic brain injury, and he was trying to heal his own injury because he found that there's not a lot out there for people who've had concussions and have protracted symptoms, because our number one advice for people who've had a concussion is to rest. And so, well, that's not very proactive. Sure, I can rest, but that's not going to guarantee it's going to fix things. And so he was looking for, how can I accelerate my recovery and get a full recovery? And that's where he discovered that. So he's got a book that outlines this beautifully about how to drain the glymphatic system. And he, again, talks about red light therapy here, over the head, intranasally, and then doing it horizontally. Yeah. But it increases the trash hauling capacity of the brain. But if you don't get 8 hours of restful sleep, it's going to interfere, because the microglia then don't come out and scrape the neurons for beta amyloids. That's their job, is to clean up beta amyloid plaques. Well, if you're not getting into stage 3 sleep, they're not cleaning the windows. You're just building up scum. So that's a problem. If you have an inflammatory diet, it again, the microglia are more concerned with inflammation than anything. And so now you've tasked them to do something because you've got a terrible diet, so that they can't be doing their regular job of keeping the garden pruned. I mean, that's really what they are. They're the little gardeners of the brain, and they keep things pruned. The macrophages come out and eat cells before they reach the end of their shelf life, and they recycle the organelles to build new neurons. And so they have all this important work to do. But if you promote inflammation, they drop all that work to address the inflammatory things. So, you don't want to do things that cause the microglia to get tasked to do things they don't need to be doing. And so sleep, diet, hydration is critically important. And then, of course, the bane of our existence and the thing I think that's going to cause the biggest problems for our health, brain health going forward is microplastics. And so microplastics interfere with DNA activity, mitochondrial DNA activity. And so red light therapy can at least give the mitochondrial DNA a fighting chance, even in the presence of microplastics, because it increases their activity. And so microplastics dampen mitochondrial DNA activity. Red light therapy increases mitochondrial DNA activity. So it can serve partially as an insulation against microplastics. But the best thing we can do is try to get them out. But everywhere we look in the environment worldwide, we're finding microplastics. So we used pulsed low EMF strength magnets to induce or trigger a neuronal action potential. So the neurologists use 1 Tesla magnet energy. And we use 300 microtesla in that ballpark. And so we're finding that we are just as effective at triggering a neuronal response, a local field potential response, with that low-level magnet pulse that we get with larger field potentials with that big woody woodpecker banging on the skull with 1 Tesla. So using 1,000th or 3,000th of a Tesla, we're seeing some of the same effects. And we can, because we're not using this big, huge magnet that's about this big around, instead of using that, we can use a much smaller magnet to more target. And again, I use QEEG to guide where I'm placing my magnets, but I can cover as much or as little as the functional neuroanatomical real estate as I need to. So for accelerated learning, I can do the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex left and right and see, and DARPA is the one that did those initial studies, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. We use their protocols and have replicated their results with much lower energy. And so and we have both in our clinic. So I have the option to use them both. I like to use the lowest level of intervention possible before I step up to the big boys, And so as a result, I don't use as much of the 1 Tesla. I use the 300 microtesla. We can slide those magnets around the band, but generally we can hit what in the EEG world we call the hat band locations. So frontal pole 1 and 2, which are left and right, frontal temporal locations F7, F8, temporal locations T3, T4, and T5, T6, and occipital locations O1, O2, and CZ location at the vertex, right here at the top. The vertex sits right over a very important brain structure called the cingulate cortex. The cingulate cortex is part of the limbic system. The limbic system is the engine of behavior. The frontal lobes are the brakes of behavior. So the limbic system does eating, drinking, sex, go to the bathroom, learning. All the goal-directed behaviors are moderated by the limbic system, and the chief organ of that is the cingulate cortex. So we put one right over the center of that structure so that we can stimulate that. So what kind of effects do we get from stimulating the cingulate cortex? Attention, learning, mental control, deconfliction of signal inputs for orientation and alerting. So it plays a role in salience, what's important. The frontal locations help with decision-making, planning, and control. On the left side, it helps with mood. On the right side, with anger management and irritability. The temporal lobes, mood stability, auditory processing. Posterior temporal poles can also play a role in some vision and spatial processing. And then O1, O2 can hit the cerebellum as well as the occipital lobe, so we can get improvements in skilled motor movements, We can get improvements in autonomic nervous system activity, blood flow, heart rate, temperature control, bodily temperature control, and improvements in visual processing, spatial processing, color visual processing. So the occipital lobe does vision, the eyes do sight, not the same thing. You can be blindsided, means your eyes can process light, but if the brain can't process the signal, can't see anything. So you can pick up light, but it can't translate it into vision. On the other hand, if the occipital lobe doesn't have access to sight data, then you can still be blind, but it's because of the eyes. Cooperatively, those two organ systems produce vision. So we can stimulate that. People come into me with all kinds of brain health issues. And so my ideal client is a pregnant gal who doesn't want to take psychiatric medicine, person who's treatment resistant to medications, the person who has strongly held personal convictions or religious beliefs that prevent them from taking medications, and others who don't like the side effects, even though they may get a therapeutic benefit from medication, psychiatric medication, can't stand the weight gain or the loss of libido or the problems with executive function that they get. And so those folks come to see me. People who have had complex trauma. I'm a combat vet and I'm a retired military guy, so I see a lot of those guys. And so I prefer to start them in on an intervention that allows me to get, again, quick assessment and quick intervention so that I can get a quick response, treatment response. It also informs me as to whether or not a higher level of stimulation might be necessary. So if they don't respond to the gentle suggestions that the micro Tesla field is generating, then maybe I need to use a stronger alternating current or direct current or random noise field. And then if they don't respond to that, then I use the TMS. But for me, TMS is a last resort, not first. It's that if all you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I have a full toolkit. And the AO has really rounded out my toolkit because I did have one audiovisual immersion tool. It does auditory visual cranial-electric stimulation or TDCS all in one, but it didn't let me do the pulsed EMF fields. So now I can do visual, auditory, cranial-electric stimulation and magnets, again, to bring to bear. So it's a force multiplier. I guess I'm using military terminology again, but it allows me to multiply my effects. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, the DSM, is the Bible for diagnosing mental disorders, or what I've referred to earlier as brain health issues. There's no construct validity and no ecological validity to the document whatsoever. You know what you call a herd of rhinos? A crash. You know what you call a herd or a group of flamingos? A flamboyant. Crows? A murder. Buzzards? A committee. And that's how the DSM was formed, by committee. There's no research that supports or validates the DSM whatsoever. And so we have people being diagnosed with mental health disorders the same way that Abraham Lincoln was diagnosed with depression in the mid-1800s. Tell me how you're feeling. Okay, here's your pill. And it's a draconian method of approaching people who are suffering. It's terrible. And so what the AO scan does is at least take some patient-centric data and then analyze it for that patient and feed it back to that patient from their own data. And it's not subjective, it's objective. It's objective data. Now in my clinic, we have tons of tools. We can do neurocognitive assessments. We can do self-report instruments. We can do QEEG assessments. We can do all those things. But if I have a person in crisis, I'm going to skip that and save it for later and do an AO assessment immediately. Because again, I can assess, address, and reassess in the same session so that I can have at least some hope that I'm going to get the person some relief in that first encounter. And again, in doing that, not only do they feel better, which is the most important thing, but then they begin to trust that the things I'm going to ask them to do later are going to be beneficial from them and for them. And so I'm not just helping them feel better. I'm building up some credibility and trust, gaining trust, so that the more difficult things I'm going to ask them to do later about cleaning up their diet and to engage in exercise and to clean up their thought life and get rid of that stinking thinking. So, and which is going to be hard work. They're going to be much more likely to do if they go, hey, he helped me from the very first session I sat in with him. And so again, force multiplier, game changer for the person in crisis. Now, for the person whose symptoms are stable and they're livable, I might not do that until I finish my other assessments so that I can pick the best path. And the best path is generally going to be multimodal. So I'm going to look at functional genetics and I'm going to supplement those as appropriate. I'm going to look at neurotransmitter stress hormones and supplement those as appropriate. I'm going to look at diet, sleep, and exercise. And I'm going to address those as appropriate. I'm going to look at the brain map and the neurocognitive test results, and I'm going to overlap those to see where are the deficits and what's the low-hanging fruit. Where's the easiest thing to intervene to get the biggest results the quickest? And it may be that the AO is the one that's going to deliver that. And I may do just audio-visual entrainment. I may just do audio entrainment with cranial electric stimulation and not do the visual, So I may pick pieces of it. I may just do the pulsed electromagnetic field microtest. I may just do that. Or because I have in my clinic the ability to do micro Tesla at the same time I'm doing PEMF whole head, then I can pick frequency-specific interventions here, and I can give broadband with the pulsed EMF. Or I may do TDCS point-to-point, or reset the cingulate through putting an anode here and a cathode here and doing direct current while I'm doing microtesla to stable out the temporal lobe. So it just gives me more flexibility to intervene. And again, the more tools you have, generally the better, not the worse. So, and then if we layer that with PBM while we're doing hyperbaric, which is my next mad scientist project, is to do the PBM helmet while they're in hyperbaric, I think we're going to see some remarkable improvements, particularly in traumatic brain injury, which is kind of like my passion for my vets is, most of them have suffered several, trauma. Matter of fact, a guy just texted me while we were talking who has had 10 TBIs and developed an epileptiform, a seizure disorder because of his head injuries. And so he's stable now, but he's also a clinician. And it's because of all the tools we brought to bear on it. So this is an exciting time to be in psychophysiology. It's just an incredibly natural medicine. I think we're going to lap the allopathic field, except for those who've decided to come and be part of it. And there's plenty of them. Matter of fact, we train tons of allopaths, and they're great partners because they're bringing domain-specific expertise of bodily systems and then applying what we're teaching them with psychophysiology and psychophysiological interventions, and they're doing great things. So they actually are great partners. Our biggest missionary efforts are with our neurologist and psychiatrist friends. But I think they're going to see, the benefits, because most of them are motivated to help their patients just like we are. And so I think they're going to be willing to adopt, if this can help their patients, they'll do it. And so it just may take a little bit longer to get out of the old way of doing things, very Machiavellian, to get out of the old way of doing things, to adopt a new order of things. But I think it's going to happen. And I hope it happens in my clinical